I read a dissertation that changed my perspective on competition in the marching arts. It focused on non-performance related correlates that were able to predict scores in the marching arts. One of the big ones is proximity to the competition space. If you have 100 members in an ensemble like a marching band, and each one of them are paying $1,000 to fly somewhere, to pay for their luggage and their instrument fees to be able to get the instrument over there, you're going to pay $100,000 for a single trip. And they are competing up against a program that lives right next to the performance space. That group is not going to need to spend $100,000 on traveling. Instead, they can focus on paying for more staff members. They can focus on better instruments, better equipment, etc. BOA Grand Nationals, this chart shows all of the groups that are going to be represented here, 113 groups. And you'll notice this huge cluster right here. Why? Well, since 2008, BOA Grand Nationals has been held at Lucas Oil Stadium, which is right here. So the groups that are in this area are going to spend significantly less money on travel than groups that are much further away. These groups that are near Lucas Oil Stadium are able to pay for a better student to staff ratio. They're able to put more money towards higher quality staff who have more experience. They're able to pay for a better design team to design a better show. They can afford better equipment and props. And this is just one of the predictors that can have an impact on how ensembles are going to score in competitions like BOA or DCI or WGI, etc. Some of the other things that might come up is like the student's ability to afford private lessons. So some schools offer private lessons and group lessons as an elective. I wish I had that when I was going to school in high school. That would have been amazing. But instead, I had to pay out of pocket to be able to study with many different people, which ended up working great. But some of my friends were not able to afford those lessons. They also were not able to afford the time to practice. So for example, I didn't need a job in high school, and I was able to, instead of spending that time each week working at a job, I was able to focus on practicing. I could also practice in a way that didn't annoy neighbors or family. So if you're living in a space where you have neighbors below you, above you, right next to you, you might not be able to work on percussion stuff compared to somebody who is living in a space where they don't have anyone that is annoyed in the immediate vicinity while practicing. Some of the students that I was working with, they could not go home and practice because they lived in apartments. So I would have the band room open before school and after school, and even during lunchtime, so students could just come in and practice because they did not have that ability to do so at home. That is another form of inequality that shows up in terms of being able to practice. But I also had some friends who were unable to practice because they had to work jobs to be able to help pay for bills with their family. So even though they wanted to be really good at drumming, they were unable to because they were having to spend so much time, money, effort, etc. on things that were not drumming related. There's also the cost to participate. So like fees to be able to perform in these ensembles. Some people can't afford that. And then there's also the loss of income while rehearsing or practicing instead of working at a job. So if you're doing like DCI, you might be gone for 2 or 3 months where you're not able to teach privately or to work at a job where you normally be making money. So not only are you paying to participate in an ensemble, you're losing money by participating because you're unable to work, or because you have to practice so you're unable to work. Some groups will even start learning their music and their drill in the spring, while other groups will wait until late summer or early fall to start learning that. Some groups will even have marching band that starts before high school. So some will start marching band in middle school, maybe even late elementary school, where they will start learning the basics. They'll start getting used to just moving and playing by playing in parades, or even having their own middle school competitions. While other high schools will not start their marching program until the freshman year, or sometimes even the sophomore year, because some high schools only go for 3 years instead of for 4 years. So they're just sophomore, junior, and seniors. These are just some of the non-performance related correlates that end up predicting some of the scores that you will see. Because again, if you're able to spend more time, more money on the things, and you're able to outperform people who are able to spend less time on this. So programs with less money and less support are at a disadvantage when they are competing against programs with more money and more support. So as an example of this, just look at this chart right here. So it's not to say that there are no good programs in California. There are certainly some phenomenal programs in California, but the cost to compete is so weighed against them compared to groups that are right next to where BOA Grand Nationals has been for decades and is continuing to be. Currently, it's scheduled to continue to have BOA Grand Nationals up until 2028 and probably sometime after that as well. So that'll be 2 decades where it has been in the same location. That gives an advantage to everyone who lives around there compared to some of the different events or competitions where things are moving around to different areas. So there's conferences that I've presented at that likes to shift from West Coast to kind of the center left to the center right to the East Coast. And so it makes it so that it's cheaper some years and more expensive other years, as opposed to just being in the same spot every single time, then that would make it so that if it's like in New York or something, then people in California will always pay more than people who are living like on the East Coast, etc. So those are just some of the inequalities that are related to the arts, and I just genuinely wish that we talked about this more. It's not just about like how good you are as an ensemble. It's not just about how good the instructors are. It's also the amount of money, the amount of time that can be invested into these different programs. So if you have a school that has $100,000 that they're paying on travel versus a school that can invest that $100,000 into paying better educators, which one do you think is going to perform better in the long run? Probably the one that's able to afford higher quality staff, or to be able to afford free private lessons for their students, or to be able to start earlier, sometimes years earlier than the other programs. It's just like a night and day difference. So if we look at like the research on expertise and skill acquisition, the whole like 10,000 hour rule, who's able to put in the 10,000 hours faster? The people who are able to spend more time on it, or the people spending less on it? Pretty easy math there. Before I get to the next tip, I just want to say really quickly that you can find literally thousands of hours of free drumming play-alongs and drumming tips in the link at the top of the description, or by going into my home tab of YouTube. I made $45,000 as a teacher with a doctorate, but low pay isn't the only reason why some music educators are bad. So here's why. Music teachers get a K-12 endorsement. So that means that we can teach any music class. It's not like it's an endorsement in teaching drumline or in marching band or in orchestra. It's an endorsement in all music. Now what that means is administrators would like to hire like very qualified people, like ideally somebody with a marching band experience to teach marching band, somebody with choral experience to teach choir classes, voice lessons, etc. But they don't always have that luxury. So for example, just to keep things simple, they might have enough classes to be able to hire a music educator who would teach 25% band, 25% orchestra, 25% choir, and 25% music technology. They don't have enough so that they can hire somebody who just teaches music technology the entire time, or just band the entire time. So they're going to hire somebody to get full-time status, and that person is going to have to teach all those different classes. Sometimes it's more than that, sometimes it's less than that, and sometimes music teachers are teaching at multiple schools. The teachers want full-time income, usually, so they will sign up to teach something that they might have very limited experience in. So the person might have like a decade of experience in band, but they may have only taken a methods course on everything else that they're being required to teach. So a methods course is a class that teaches you how to teach a instrument or a skill at all grade levels. So for example, I had to take methods courses, low brass, high brass, woodwinds, double reed instruments. I had to take it on high strings, low strings, on percussion, even though I was a percussionist, it was kind of ridiculous I had to do it. I also had to take marching band. So some schools will have marching band as like a methods course. And the music technology one, there's also a general music one, there's a piano one, etc. So there are many classes that you have to take in order to learn how to become a music educator. One of the problems with the methods courses is they focus on breadth and not necessarily the depth. So they will often focus on like how to play an instrument, but not necessarily how to teach an instrument. So a lot of the people who are ending up teaching these like methods courses are like TAs for performance majors or faculty from the performance side of things. So they have experience playing on the instrument and teaching that instrument, but they don't have the experience teaching it within context. So for example, they may have never actually taught a K-12 school, but they're going to teach you how to play trombone and not necessarily how to teach trombone within like an elementary school or a high school or whatever. So this creates some issues because they just frankly don't know how to teach very well in the K-12 setting. They're only used to being able to teach it at like collegiate level, etc. So you also have issues with not just like the methods courses that you have to take, which there's a lot of them, but you also have to take multiple music theory courses, multiple history courses, non-career related degree requirements like math, science, etc. Combine all of this and it makes it so that it dilutes your experience within the program when it comes to how to teach music classes. So you're focusing on all these extra things that don't necessarily make you better at being able to teach in multiple different music related concepts. This is why undergrads typically focus on the performance side of things, and then master's students actually learn how to teach, like you're diving more into that, and then doctoral students focus on research or on how to teach educators. What you end up with is you get a bunch of people who might be really amazing at performing something, or might have like a lot of experience being able to teach privately or working with like a specific subset within music, for example, like choir, but they've never focused on teaching like an entire ensemble, or they've never focused on teaching different types of classes like music technology or percussion class, etc. This makes it so that there are very highly qualified educators who can teach a very subset of music classes, but they're being asked to teach things outside of that, and that makes it so that they end up being really bad. So if you have a music teacher who's not very good at what they do in the class that you are in, it might be because they're actually much better at something else. They might be like a jazz person who's being asked to teach choir, and they've never actually performed in choir, but they took a methods course, so they're considered highly qualified. So that creates an issue. While teachers do certainly make very low income, like I more than than doubled my salary, like leaving teaching and going into nonprofit space. The issue is not just like the low teacher pay attracting people who are less qualified. It's just that the actual degrees that you get are diluted because you're taking so many classes and so many things, and you're being asked to teach stuff outside of your expertise, which actually relates to a little story that I have. I'm actually not considered to be highly qualified in the state of Arizona. So when I was going to go from my provisional to like the standard certificate as an educator, they discovered, the Department of Education, that I did not ever take a class on phonics, like how to teach phonics and whatnot. And so they're like, sorry, you're not actually highly qualified. You have to take this class in order to be able to get the standard certificate. And at that time, I had a doctorate. I had been teaching in the elementary space for 7 years. I had won awards as an educator, as a scholar, etc. All of that didn't matter. The fact that I had a bachelor's, master's, PhD in music education, I was still considered to be not highly qualified because I did not take a class, a 100 level class on phonics. Now, the thing that was really funny about this and why I decided ultimately not to actually take that class is because I pulled up some of the universities and community colleges in the area and started reading off some of the classes, and I was like, this class, would that count for this requirement that I need to be able to get the standard certificate? And I would read it off. Here's a 100 course for education majors on phonics. They said, we can't actually tell you whether or not the class would count until you finished the class and submitted the transcript, and then we would tell you whether or not it counted. So they're basically asking me to take a semester-long course only to find out after I completed the course whether or not it would actually count towards that thing that I was missing for my requirements to be considered certified as highly qualified within the state of Arizona. Now, what's funny about all this is in Arizona in particular, it's actually up to the principal or to the admin at the school to determine whether or not you're considered to be highly qualified. And so the admin could hire somebody who's like going to teach a business class who's never gotten any education classes, never formal education, etc., and say, yeah, they're highly qualified because they ran successful businesses and they can hire them. That makes it so that there's like a much faster pipeline to be able to get teachers to teach in the classrooms because Arizona, there's a shortage, but it creates so many different issues where, like, if you're going the standard route, you're considered not to be highly qualified with a doctorate in education. I have over 100 presentations. I've done over a dozen publications, all these awards as an educator, and I'm not considered highly qualified because I never took a 100 level course on phonics. And it's like, what? So the education system is broken in many, many different ways.